Welcome back, everyone. So the objective of this particular exercise is to illustrate how it's possible to use the built-in Excel functions as part of your Visual Basic code. Now, we all know that Excel has this huge library of functions that you use in cells and formulas. For example, you could type equals sum and then calculate the sum of a range of numbers, average, etc., etc. It turns out that there are many cases when you're writing Visual Basic code where you think, well, I wish I had a function to do X, and that could be something that's already built into an Excel function. Well, if that's the case, it turns out there is in fact a way to access built-in Excel functions in your Visual Basic code. So in this little exercise we're going to experiment doing that. And so the scenario we've set up here is that we're going to write a function called dropSum, D-R-O-P-S-U-M, where you give it two arguments. The first argument is a range of cells, and the second argument is a number n, where the function will then return the sum of all the values in the range, we're assuming they're numeric values, minus the n lowest values. So if you give it a range and then actually what we're going to do is we're going to apply it in these cells down here in the blue row, row 26. So we would say, okay, add up all the numbers in this column minus the four lowest numbers. And here we'll add up all the numbers in this column minus the three lowest numbers, and so forth. Now, why would you subtract some numbers from a sum? Well, that's, I don't know. I just made this up to give us a use case, but that's not the point. The point is we can solve this very easily using the Excel built-in function. So assume if you didn't have the Excel built-in functions to draw from, so you'd have to somehow figure out how to find the three lowest numbers in the range. And while that's not a terribly difficult thing to do, you'd have to come up with some kind of sorting algorithm, and then once you sorted the numbers, find the three lowest ones. But that, if you're just trying to knock this out in a few minutes, that could be a real roadblock that could complicate your code. But there is a worksheet function sum that will add the numbers up for you. Not that that's terribly difficult to do, but it'll do that. There's also a worksheet function called small, S-M-A-L-L, where you give it a range and then a number, and it will return the nth smallest value. And so that's what we're going to take advantage of here. So so we're also going to get some practice writing a custom function as well. So let's jump over to our code. Type option explicit and then function dropSum, r as range. So our first argument will be a range we call r, and n as integer, which is the number of low values to drop, and then this is going to return a double. Okay, so let's we're going to need a looping variable. I'll get to that in a second, but the first thing we want to do is calculate the sum of the values in the range. Now, we could easily write a for each loop that iterates through each of the cells in the range and adds up the values, but there's a faster way to do it. We could just say dropSum equals application.worksheetFunction dot. So, by the way, let me back up a little bit. When application is there's an object called an application object, and the worksheet function object is part of that application object. So you have to go a couple levels deep here. And then when you type dot after typing worksheet function, it gives you a list of all of the Excel functions, which are listed here as methods, that are available for use in Visual Basic. And so we want the sum, so we just type sum, open paren, and then it lists, you have to give it at least one argument, and then you can have up to 30 total arguments here. It's going kind of scrolling off the screen where you can't see it, but I'm just going to do R, the range. And so we've passed the range. So we're taking the first argument to our function as a range, and we're going to pass it to the worksheet function.sum, which gives us access to the sum function. And of course, you can pass a range to a sum function. That's the standard way it's used. And that's going to return that sum, and we're going to store that in drop sum variable, which is the function name, and that's going to be eventually our return value when we get to the end of the function. Now, I want to mention something else. You'll notice I said application.worksheetFunction. This is another one of those cases where you can cheat a little bit. It works perfectly well as long as you're just working in Excel. It's perfectly legal just to delete that and go directly to worksheet function. It'll find that object if you happen to leave that off. Yet another case of how Visual Basic lets you get away with murder. So here we go. Now what we need to do is subtract the 3 lowest values from this sum that we've put into drop sum. And we can do that very easily using the for I equals loop. So we can say for I equals 1 to n, drop sum equals drop sum minus worksheet function dot small. And by the way, you'll notice when it lists the arguments to these functions, it doesn't give you the actual description. It just says arg1, arg2, so forth. So when you go to use these, you need to be aware what each of those arguments represents, and you can do that easily using the Excel help utility. And I've done this already on this one. The first argument is a range, and the second argument is an integer representing the nth, representing 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., indicating which of the smallest values you want it to return. 1 means the smallest, 2 means the second smallest, and so forth. So we're just going to put I there, and then next I, and that right there solves our problem. Again, we calculate the sum of the values in the range, and then we're going to go through this loop n times, and each time through the loop we're going to calculate the ith smallest value and subtract it from drop sum. So the first time through the loop, it'll find the smallest value in the list and subtract that, and the second time the second smallest value, and so forth. So this little bit of code right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines inside our function statement, solves our problem for us. And again, if you were to write this up from scratch without using these 2 worksheet functions, this could require a fair amount of work. And it's not something you could easily do inside an Excel formula because it requires some iteration, and you need some Visual Basic code to do that. So let's give it a shot. Go over here and save our changes. Say equals drop sum, and we're going to select this value here for the range, and then we're going to select this number here for the second argument. And now what I've done here is I know exactly what. So you see how this says pound name? It says, hey, wait a minute, I can't find your function, and I'm positive I spelled it correctly. But what that means is, typically when that happens, it means you put your function code in the wrong place, which is exactly what happens. I put this in the sheet code, and it needs to be in a module in order to use it in a formula. So I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna go over to my module and paste, put it right there. We can close that window and save your changes. This is real-time programming, folks. And now there it is. So yeah, even I make that mistake sometimes, but it's pretty easy to fix. So let's check our work here. So let's say equals sum. We're going to just see if we have the right values, and then I'm going to just look through here. Well, let's use the small function. So say equals small. I'll calculate this, and comma 1, and then equals small, calculate the second smallest value, comma 2. So the two smallest values are 84 and 43. And so if we take the sum minus this and then minus that, we get false. Whoops, hit an equal sign instead of a minus sign. We get 665. So that works. You know, subtracting a negative number actually makes it a little small, a little larger, but yeah, mathematically that's the right answer. So it appears to be working correctly. And so again, if you ever encounter a circumstance in your Visual Basic programming that could benefit from the use of a built-in Excel function, all you have to do is type WorksheetFunction dot and then the function name. Make sure you pass it the right number of arguments in the right order, and it works like a charm. It's a great little tool to have in your programming arsenal.